Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Vicky Roubekas. She's a psychologist, coach, an author, and a speaker. And her practice is in Calgary, Alberta. Now she does all kinds of exciting different practices that are mindful based, like Hakomi. She also does EMDR and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and embodied awareness facilitator, offering spiritually directed therapy. And okay, I have a feeling where we're going to go with this. But first of all, welcome. And my first question to you really is, what led you down this particular journey?
Yeah, for me, basically, was trying to figure out my own trauma that I had experienced throughout life and trying to find healing from that. And I've always been more into alternative therapies. When I was my first career, when I was younger, I worked as an administrative assistant for a gastroenterologist for almost 20 years at the University of Calgary. And as a result, really saw the disconnect between what the pharmaceutical industry does and health, that does not see people holistically and does not incorporate their physical body as a part of the healing, which is ironic because it's health. And with my own self, right? My own healing journey really led to me seeking out alternative therapies, spiritually based therapies, Reiki, shamanism, finding a way of connection to bring in that holistic sense of self that includes whole bunch of different things that most people don't access.
Mm-hmm. Well, access is it's kind of the word that was coming to mind, right? So you do shamanic work.
Yes.
You do mindfulness.
Yes.
That integrates the body. In
Yes.
other words, it's not just in the mind, like some people think.
Yes. Yes.
And then the connection to spirituality. Can you maybe sort of go like an overview of, if I were a new patient?
Yes.
How would you know what the right thing is for me, and how would you? Yeah. I was inquisitive. Huh?
Typically, people who seek me out already have a spiritual aspect and are looking for somebody that does integrate spirituality, because they are what I guess we would call maybe on the fringe. They experience their own intuitiveness. Maybe they have psychic abilities, and they can't really speak to anybody about it. Then they also have their own traumas, and they have their emotional states of whatever is going on for them. So as a result, they need a bridge for both of those, that they can speak to somebody who is not going to look at them and go like, okay, you need to be medicated, or you need to be, analyzed by a psychiatrist, in the thinking that there's something externally wrong with them, because we can have some pretty intense experiences that are not of this world. And as a result, that can be very difficult for people to not feel like they can be seen, that they can be have a sense of like validation for their experiences. So that's kind of like where it typically starts. For me, of course, I get the range. So some people, even though they know that I'm a spiritual psychologist, they come to me for just, mostly their trauma or their anxiety. And they have but I always ask, so what is your spiritual belief system, if anything? Because I like to incorporate things that they can do. And then I also potentially, if they're open to it, give them some information that they may not have thought of about how they can incorporate these different aspects, whether it's shamanic traditions, whether it is energy healing, to then utilize outside of therapy to support their own well-being for release of emotions, release of trauma, and just being in a different way with themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you touched upon a different way with themselves, right? Because I think that's kind of, at least the way I understand spirituality, because I've had, well, I have several questions on
Yeah.
that section. So first of all, how do you identify that you have a spiritual belief system? Now, of course, if you're raised a certain way,
Right.
and you have a religion,
Correct.
which may or may not agree with or like the system or the program.
Yeah.
But taking that aside,
Mhm.
how do you identify that you have a spiritual component?
Right. What I say about spirituality, and of course, yes, it's separate, completely separate from religion. And to me, it's a philosophy. It is what is it for you? What is the philosophy for you? What is your own definition of what you see spirituality for you? So that person has to identify it for themselves. But what I see spirituality as being is, but we're all connected. So we're all connected energetically. We're all connected to the whole, not just to each other, but to the planet, to the universe. And as a result, that means that you are tapping into this consciousness that is of the whole, of the collective, and also tapping into a knowing, an internal knowing that is a resonant to that, whether that's your soul, your higher self, your internal state, your internal knowing. So your spirituality comes from that base that we are all connected, and that consciousness is not just within us, but it's outside of us. It's transpersonal. We're interconnected to everything, and so to the cosmos. And then as a result, spirituality becomes the seeking of the connection for you of what is physically, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually right for you personally. So for some people, that may be seeking out more mindfulness or Buddhist philosophies. For other people, they may be for them, spirituality means a connection to a higher power, or a universe, right? For some other people, it's connection to goddess energy and Mother Earth. For other people, it may be energy work. So a person has to find their calling and their own knowing to what that is spirituality is for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a good, I mean, good. It's a complete answer in that sense. I can see that it does, you have a hint that there's more,
Yes.
right, to start with.
Yeah.
And I think then it's like, how do you see that actually coming into existence? What are the beliefs you have
Yes.
and the philosophies of life that support this, or or question it, or whatever it is, but now, because you do a lot of work with trauma, people with
Absolutely.
have you noticed, at least I'll speak for myself and I'll ask you, I've noticed that there's a very big link in trauma to spirituality. In other words, one of the insights, when you're able to say that it happened for me, not to me, which is not easy to do. Like, so I don't want to diminish anyone who's not at that, it's not a stage, but who doesn't see it that way. It's fine. But when you do, then I feel like this whole spiritual aspect kicks in.
Yes.
Is that?
I agree with that. I witnessed it specifically in myself, but I see it in my clients as well. There is always because there's a seeking of hope. There's a seeking of answers. There's a seeking of understanding. Like, why did I experience this? Why did this happen to me? Why did I have to suffer? When you're in it, you don't see it, and you're not supposed to. When you're in it, that's it. You're in trauma, and you can't distinguish yourself outside of it. And so it's very difficult for people who've experienced a trauma initially when they come to see me, because they are stuck in the experience with all of the symptoms that come with that, and having to see themselves and their identity as being like not who they thought they were. And then of course there's blame, and there's guilt and shaming self, because there's a belief that I was responsible for this thing happening to me, when that's not the case. It can take many years. So spirituality starts because I think people are seeking out answers to heal their pain and their suffering. And it evolves from there. And I think spirituality grows, and just like we do as humans, we're constantly growing. We're not meant to be stagnant. We're supposed to seek out and question and have answers. I think that's what our brains have the ability to do. And as a result, then you can kind of like accumulate a whole bunch of information and knowledge spirituality wise into your life and what that means specifically for you. But I always say that trauma is a catalyst for people to make change. And then when they look back on their life, when they are at that end, which is like many, many years later for a lot of people, they can go like, oh, I see now. I see why that was. I'm not that thing, that trauma that was, I'm not the trauma.
Right.
That was something that happened to me. But it was a learning for me to understand who I am and who I've become as a person. And often, not everybody, but many people will then go into some form of service as a result of their trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly identify with that. And I've seen it as well many times. And the other part that I found interesting, because again, there's such a parallel you have in your in how you work with people. You also go through a somatic level, and I've had such an issue, with dealing in general with, people who are traumatized, who then say, oh, I want to see a psychologist, or I want to see a psychiatrist. And I'm like, because they're the right people for this. And it's like, actually, if we can do somatic work, we're going to get there way faster than if we just spend our time in our heads, whether it's rehashing the story or rewriting the story. I'm not saying there isn't a bit of that, you need to be heard, you need to be seen, you need to express, maybe, at least release, but there's that. But I find that the work goes faster and more profoundly when you connect to your actual body.
Absolutely. Because that's where the trauma is stored.
Yes.
As a result, we store the energy of everything that we've experienced in our physical body. If we hold on to it, if we haven't processed it out fully, then we store it in our body. So as a result, that's why we experience certain symptoms in relationship to body, and of course a disconnect to the body, which is the biggest thing. So as a result, people stop listening, stop paying attention, stop having an awareness, have limiting beliefs of self in regards to their body, have negative self-talk about their body because they've had experience of trauma that may feel like it's a betrayal, that their body betrayed them in some way or isn't safe. And then so as a result, people need to get access to that. And it's not easy because again, you are bringing up and you're unlocking. You could do that with yoga. Like some people are like, I don't know why I'm in a yoga pose and I'm bawling my eyes out, because you've tapped into something that stored in that part, and it's released. And that's the piece. You can reconnect to your body and feel into the sensations. It truly is a different way of being. And again, you're connecting so deeply to a part of yourself. You can have talk therapy for many, many years in my perspective, and not access the deep stuff, not get to your subconscious brain that is really going to tell you and give you some answers and clarity about things that you never thought of before. And that's what I love about that kind of work. You're getting out of your left analytical brain and you're getting into your right part of your brain that helps you to unpack the limbic system, unpack all of the experiences and memories within a body felt state.
Yeah, no, and I think the way that I've been accessing it when I had a practice, because I'm not in practice now,
right?
But, is through pain. People would identify with pain. Often that's the problem. Now, the real problem is the trauma behind it.
Yes.
And the pain may well be the manifester of the symptom.
Yes.
But, and that's why often doing other kind of physical work, like whether it's chiro or physio, it doesn't work. Or, I mean, it works a bit, but it doesn't really get to the root, is because the cause is not the same. The cause is the harbored, emotional story.
Yes.
that is now in your subconscious, right? In your tissues.
Correct.
So then it's like, well, I tried this, I tried that, it didn't work. And then, so the therapy I do is called Bowen therapy. I don't know if you've heard about it.
I have.
You have, yeah. And it's quite incredible because it's like a bypass, because they want their pain gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then the body does everything it needs to do all by itself, because we're so well built.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you can hold the space,
Mm-hmm.
and know how to deal with what may come up,
yes,
it's like it just accelerates the process tremendously, where the body literally speaks, which it always does, but you start to go, oh my goodness, it's speaking to me.
yes, absolutely.
So what forms, because I know a lot of my students that are like, they want to take somatic work, and I'm thinking, what else is there? And I have never done other work than this as my somatic work.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the type of work you do, or works that you have seen work really well.
Right. So for me specifically, it is when I'm doing somatic, it's Hakomi as being one aspect of that. And
Manon Bolliger here, and I want to thank you for taking actionable steps towards engaging your healing journey and helping others discover their path by watching, sharing, subscribing, and reviewing these podcasts. Every review and share helps spread the word, these different perspectives and choices and options for healing. And to thank you, I'd like to invite you to sign up to my free 7-sequence email tips on health and healing for everyday life. You can go to healerscafe.com tips. Thanks so much.
And how Hakomi works is basically we may have a brief discussion about, what's been happening for you, and then we tap into the body. So where are you feeling that in your body? And then eyes get closed, and then we do an exploration. We just follow it. It's the organicity of the body. What does the body need to do? Tell us, move. Because often when there is trauma, we typically with fight, flight, freeze, and most people freeze, the body freezes in certain positions, and they feel stuck in that position. So the body sometimes will just need to unwind in a sense. And with Hakomi, touch can be a part of that. It's just dependent. So sometimes we need to come up to the person if they're experiencing something where they have their body has done something as a means to support, but it's actually harming them. So as an example, let's say their shoulders are up high, and I may bring that up. I go, do you notice that your shoulders are up right now? No, I've never noticed that. And they're like, up at their ears, like, because this is a body response to trauma, to whatever experience has happened to them, and that's the body's go-to. So in order to release that, the person needs to stop doing that for themselves. So right. I would come in as the Hakomi therapist, and I would put my hands on the shoulders where they're holding it and do the work for them, so that they can access deeper memories, emotions. Where is this coming from? How far back does this go? Does this feel familiar? Right? Exploring it in all its ways, using all senses, so that they can really tap into this. And then there's usually a point where there is a release. Usually first there'll be like an access to a past memory, and then we do a re-experiencing of that memory, so that they can, what they needed to happen, whether it's somebody like I can step in and be the person speaking up on their behalf, or maybe they need to be the person that speaks up and says something on the behalf of whatever needed to happen at that moment, or being supported or being held and nurtured. So it's very important for as the therapist to really feel into, and often child state will come up, and especially when trauma is really quite young, the person will revert to child state, and they will be in their child state. So they need to be soothed, they need to be talked to as if they're a child, so that they can really give voice to what they needed at that time that they didn't get. And then there's a release, there's a new understanding, and there's more ability to take more breath. Then at some point I would release my hands from the shoulders, and it's the new now integration of how does the body feel now that this has been, what the experience that you needed that you didn't have, now you've gotten, right? What does the child self need? Connecting with the child self outside of therapy, being childlike in nature, all those things are talked about afterwards, but that's typically how Hakomi works.
Mm. Okay. So it sounds to me, I mean, it's very much in the moment, following the person.
Yes.
And the practitioner needs to have the skill of touch, but also the skill of I mean, of processing or helping process or
Yes.
facilitating the next step.
Facilitating. Yes.
Yeah.
You're just following the body, and then you're helping them. And sometimes you're saying things to them, especially if there's something that comes up for them. Like when you can start to see and understand the client, let's say they have a limiting belief that is like, I'm not good enough, right? And you can see it. You can see it from the things that you've talked about beforehand, and how they're presenting themselves with being connected with their body. So then sometimes you will just like, I'm going to say a statement to you. Just take a notice and notice what happens when I say the statement. And then you say the statement and you say, Manon, you're good enough. And then usually tears will come if you hit the good one on the button, because they don't believe it. And then you go from there, and that helps to, again, awaken and open up a new understanding and a release of that limiting belief that's held them back, where it comes from. And to be, again, then you give them the permission to recognize that they are that they can accept that in themselves, because often they don't.
Yeah.
And that's where the stuckness stays.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I'm going to switch, but that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And you work in shamanism. What's the approach you take? What's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into it? What is that? Where does that situate itself?
Yes. So when I do shamanic work, it's typically in conjunction with Reiki, so energy work. I kind of combine the two, and I do that usually on table work. When I talk about shamanic practices within a psychological perspective, sometimes I'm doing Reiki energy if I'm doing EMDR while the person is holding and doing their thing, and they want that. I also provide energy work, because energy work is a facilitation. Again, it's another added layer of the release from your auric field, from all of the energy centers, again, of the trauma that you've carried, to help that to just completely clear and to support that. With shamanic practices, it is more, so mine is Peruvian shamanism. That's what I was trained in. And so it's very earth-based. It's all about connecting to Mother Earth, Pachamama. And what you do is you are utilizing nature to not only in grounding, but to release your state of emotions, trauma. You can utilize. So for me, if I was facilitating a session, I would be, and I incorporate a little bit Indigenous too, because I have Indigenous background. So then I would be like, maybe using drumming, definitely rattling on the person, using crystals to remove stuck energy from that person, opening up energy centers to help whatever needs to clear. So it's a little bit more body oriented in that sense, where you are physically going into the body. And then you do a lot of journeying, which is you are then connecting to, a new higher level, different knowing of what is happening for this person, to give them information in a symbolic form. So if I see a picture of a horse, I'm like, I see a picture of a horse. It's up to the person to decide, what does that mean for me? Right? And in session, if I'm talking about it, I will tell them techniques. So I give them like homework that's based on shamanic traditions. Like you can utilize when you're releasing, like as an example, most therapists would say like journaling is fantastic. So I go add a little bit more to that. So you can utilize, you need to release the emotion from your physical body. So as a result, you can use a stick, you can use a leaf, you can use a stone from the earth, and you can physically blow in the pain and the suffering while you're journeying, and while you're journaling, and while you're talking about it. You can speak it out to the universe and to Mother Earth to transmute the energy of that experience and feel into the emotions and really truly feel them, and blow them into the whatever object it is from your gut. Like you're just like, and you're just breathing in as much out as you need to. And then you can physically use the object. And that's what's usually better with a stone, where you can rub it. Where do I feel it on my body? And you're unwinding it, and you're releasing it, and you're letting it go. And then you put it on the earth, and you basically let it sit, and you can come back to it. You can choose, do I have more to release? What do I need to release today? So that every day you could pick up that stone for as long as you need to. And there may be a new thing. Oh, now I'm angry at my mother for doing this to me. Then speak the words. Just, let it out physically. So it can be an extremely powerful tool.
Mm. Mm. So when you have a new person, then it's figuring out where to start with all the different
Yes.
tools, and what guides you to in your treatment plan in that sense. How do you
my intuition. My intuition.
Your intuition, yeah.
Yep. And I see where certain things would make sense of what needs to transpire. And some things are a little bit too out there for some people, so they would never be brought up, right? Some people that are more open are like, yeah, that's along the lines of something that I would want to try. Or we explore and then we see how that utilizes. And so when we're doing more spiritually based therapy, like with embodied awareness, what I like about that tool is that that type of modality of therapy is that you are accessing again your higher sense of self and your own inner intuition. So you come up with your own plan, your own game plan, your own knowing and messages to yourself about what this means for you based on what we were exploring. And what action steps do they need to take?
Right. Yeah, it's such a fascinating way of being able to connect with people and facilitate profound change, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how do people find you? What do they look up?
It's interesting because I always ask, how did you find me?
Yeah.
People write spiritual therapist or spiritual thing with spirituality in it, and it seems to pick up on that. And those are the ones that are typically drawn for me most people that come to me feel two things. Number one, that they like that I tell my personal story, because there's a big disconnect when you have to go to a therapist and you feel like you don't get to know anything about them.
Right.
So I think it's important that people feel like, oh, she gets me. She's had similar experiences. So many people who read my about page feel connected to me because they go like, oh, she gets me because she's experienced similar things. And from there, mostly I guess people have told me that really it's just, and again, after so many years right now, it's a lot of word of mouth. So I get a lot of clients and then they tell people who are the same like-minded spiritual tribe. And then that's how people come to see me.
Yeah, because another aspect of the work I do is with Bowen College, anyways, the college I run, is help people get seen and so-called market, and I say, share your own story, because it doesn't matter, we do similar things and other people add this or this, we all have our own way of relating, but if people don't know your story, they're not going to connect.
Not at all.
And you're going to have plenty of people that connect with you that maybe your story isn't right for some people, and they'll go, okay, no, I'll find somebody else that, right? Because people have judgments and whatever, that's fine. But then, it's not your perfect client anyways, right? So
absolutely. And I tell my clients that I may not be your perfect therapist. You may be drawn to my webpage. And the first thing I tell my clients is, like, you found me, lovely, or you were referred to me by so-and-so. I said, this is about you. This isn't about me. This has to be right. You need to feel safe with me, comfortable with me, that the modalities that I'm using are what you expected and what you wanted. So if you don't, and you don't see me ever again, I don't take anything personally. This is your journey. This is not my journey.
Yeah. That's so important. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I can't believe our time is already up. So is there any last minute, your website will be up. I'm assuming you also see people online or not?
I do. Yep.
Okay.
Online and in person. Yep.
Okay. And anything else that you want to share in the last couple minutes?
No, just for those that may be interested in kind of like the encompassment of all that I do in my book that I recently wrote, which is called Embodied. It's on Amazon, and it basically is helping people who have disconnected from their body and how to reconnect to their body using kind of like the things that I stated: mindfulness, grounding, connecting to your senses and your extrasensory perception, energy work, and shamanism. And it basically incorporates a whole bunch of exercises that people can do at home, within the comfort of their own home, to try to explore and try to reconnect to their body.
So it's called Embodied.
Embodied.
Embodied. Do you have a copy of it?
Yeah, I do.
Show it. Embodied. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
I have not read it, clearly. I keep thinking there will be a life of time when I can
too many books. Yeah, I agree. It's hard.
Anyway, it was a lovely meeting you.
Very nice meeting you. Thank you so much, Manon, for facilitating this and allowing the opportunity for people like myself to get our messages out to people who need us.
Exactly. You couldn't have said it better. That's exactly what I want.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.